record by telling them your name and spelling it so the court gets it right.
Good morning. I'm Phil Stoddard. I'm a detective with the Cobb County Police Department. Stoddard is spelled S-T-O-D-D-A-R-D.
And Detective Stoddard, how long have you worked with Cobb County Police?
I've been with Cobb County Police since 2007.
And what's your job there right now?
Right now I'm assigned as a detective with the Crimes Against Persons Division, which is a major crimes division. You've also heard it responded to as, or talked to about as a robbery homicide division.
And how long have you worked in that division now?
I've been there since December 2013.
And tell the jury a little bit about the other positions you've had at Cobb County Police.
When I started with Cobb County Police, you start off as any other officer. You start out as in patrol. And after patrol, as you work your way up, you become a field training officer. And you go through some more specialty training. After being a field training officer for a while, I moved over to the Criminal Investigations Unit as a detective. Criminal Investigations is property theft, terroristic threats, or not terroristic threats, but property damage and stuff like that, burglaries, property stuff. After that, I moved over to Crimes Against Children. I went through some more training. Crimes Against Children, I was there for approximately like 10 months. After being in Crimes Against Children, which investigates, we'll just say crimes against children, sexual, physical type abuse. After that, I moved over to the Crimes Against Persons Division, which is, like I said, a major crimes division.
And before you joined Cobb County Police, did you work in another jurisdiction or in the state of Georgia?
I did. I started out with the City of Atlanta Police Department. I started with them. I was hired on in April 2001. I was there until April 2007.
And before you joined APD, were you, what did you do professionally?
Before I joined APD, I was in the Coast Guard for 11 years. I worked as a health services technician, as a medic, if you would call it in the Army, or a corpsman if you're familiar with the Navy.
And as a part of your training as a law enforcement officer, have you undergo constant training in the field that you're in now and that fields you were in at the time, like crimes against children, things like that?
That's true.
Okay. Did that involve interviewing potential suspects, investigating crime scenes, and things of that nature?
Yes, it does.
I'm going to turn your attention back to June the 18th of 2014. Where were you working with Cobb PD at that time?
At that time, I was working for the Crimes Against Persons Division.
And what shift were you working back then?
I was working evening shift. That would be from 3 p.m. to 1 a.m. in the morning.
Where was y'all's office in regard to Cobb County?
It's in the center of Cobb County. It's right off Marietta Square.
And is your unit, is it based there at Cobb County headquarters?
It is.
That afternoon, were you asked to respond to a crime scene?
I was.
Okay. Who were you called by and at what time, if you remember?
That afternoon, we're going to say approximately 16:50 hours or 4:50 p.m. on the 18th. I was investigating a homicide. It's a 2012 homicide, and I was picking up evidence for it. I received a phone call from Detective Stockinger stating that himself and Detective Racy were going to be en route to a child death investigation.
And where was this area that you were actually at trying to get evidence for this different homicide?
We were down in Smyrna at the Smyrna Police Station getting a firearm.
Now, Smyrna, is that the general area where you are, I say general, like not on the north side of Cobb County, but kind of down in the south area of Cobb County, the same as where you were being asked to respond to?
It's close.
And what is the address of the location that you were asked to respond to?
We were asked to locate out to 2955 Acres Mill Road in front of Uncle Mattio's Pizza.
And is that's in Cobb County, Georgia?
That is in Cobb County, Georgia.
And all the locations we're going to talk about here, that location, the Treehouse Home Depot location, Home Depot headquarters, Little Apron Academy, Chick-fil-A, all these locations, are they within Cobb County in the state of Georgia?
They are.
Okay. When you received that call, were you with any other detectives at the time?
I was with Detective Sean Murphy.
Is he also in the Crimes Against Persons unit?
That is correct.
When you guys got the call, how long did it take you, or what time did you respond to the scene?
Like I said, 4:50 p.m. we get the phone call. I arrived on the scene probably about 5:07 p.m.
And at 5:07 p.m., could you describe the situation there at the scene when you arrived, as far as was crime scene tape up yet? What did you observe yourself?
We arrived on the scene. There was already crime scene tape up in the parking lot. There appeared to be a blue Hyundai SUV sitting there. The driver's side door was open. There was a sheet covering an object, or I was told there to be a person, Cooper Harris, on the ground. Several officers around the crime scene.
And did you also notice a patrol vehicle with a person that was involved in the child's death?
It was pointed out to me that the father of the infant or the child was sitting in a patrol car. The patrol car had been moved a little bit further away from the actual location.
When you arrived at the crime scene, did you speak with any supervisors, and were you told what your role in the case was going to be?
When I arrived on scene, Captain Farrell, Lieutenant Farrell at the time, he was our division commander, arrived shortly after. When we arrived, you get together with all the detectives, you kind of start doing a game plan. At that time, it was decided that I would be the lead detective in this case, that Detective Sean Murphy would be my second.
And were there other detectives there at the scene who were also going to assist you with parts of this investigation?
Yes, there were several other detectives at the scene.
When you were there, did you get briefed on the case by anybody in particular? Or speak with any officers, detectives, or anything like that? Without going into what they told you, did you speak with them?
Yes.
Okay, and who did you speak with?
I spoke with Officer Piper.
And did then Lieutenant Farrell also talk to you and kind of brief you on what they knew at the time?
That's correct.
Okay, was this, as I guess, in your job as a person's prosecutor when you're investigating homicides, are these situations and these investigations, are they often fluid?
They are. They're very fluid.
Okay. And are there a lot of moving parts?
There are.
So at that point, as the lead detective, what was your role at that time?
As lead detective, when you arrive on a crime scene or a death investigation at the crime scene, everybody looks to what you want to have done next. You start kind of having people go out and do assignments for you. That could be interviewing people, gathering evidence, setting up where your suspect is or where the people involved are. Have them move to another location, make sure that the medical office has been notified. You're kind of taking care of everything. I've heard it it's referred to as a ringmaster.
Okay. Now, when you arrived and you started doing that, at some point while you're discussing this with officers and detectives and things like that, did you have an opportunity to go over to the patrol car where the father of the child was?
I did. When I get to scenes like this, I always want to put eyes on the person involved. I walked down there. He was in handcuffs. He was seated in the rear of the police car. I introduced myself. I told him how the investigation would proceed, up to and including what would happen to Cooper's remains.
At that point, did you tell him where he was going to be going and whether he was going to be unhandcuffed or not when you got there?
I did. In my experience, once a person is handcuffed on a scene like that, I don't have knowledge where I wasn't there when he was handcuffed. I was just told by the officers what had happened, and so...
Judge, I'm going to object to this. This isn't even responsive to the question that was asked.
Judge is explaining what he's doing and talking to the defendant.
Well, perhaps that it's not responsive, but you
Okay.
can ask a question.
Okay. When you were speaking with him in the back of the patrol car, you said you were talking to him and explaining to him what was going on, and we were talking about him being handcuffed.
That's correct.
Okay. And explain why you talked to him about being handcuffed or not when you get back to the patrol car.
He expressed to me that he wanted the handcuffs taken off. I expressed to him that I was not aware why the handcuffs were put on. In my experience, once the handcuffs are put on a scene like that, we're going to leave the handcuffs on. Okay?
And so at that point, did he ask you questions about him being detained and why he's being detained?
He did.
Okay. And did you give him reasons why, or did you try to express to him something else that you would talk later?
We just told him we were going to talk later. And I told him, we're going to take you up to headquarters. You're going to be unhandcuffed, to be put in a room. I will respond up there, and I'll speak with you up there. We're not going to do it here on the scene.
So he informed him he was going to go to a room and be interviewed in this room.
Judge, that's leading.
Okay. I don't think it's suggesting. It's a suggestive leading question would be like, didn't you go and put him in a room? It's not suggesting an answer.
It's giving the answer, Judge, so that's why I objected to it.
But it's directory. I'm going to allow it over objection.
Thank you. So I think you answered it anyway, so I'll move on, Detective. So who transported the defendant to the police department?
Officer Piper.
And where were you going to actually talk to and interview the defendant?
The defendants actually talked to, we have 2 interview rooms at the Crime Against Persons, which is Cobb County Police Headquarters. The rooms are set up for interviews.
Did you go immediately or ride with him or anything of that nature?
I did not.
Who left first, Officer Piper or yourself?
Officer Piper.
Now, how far is it just generally from where the scene was at Acres Mill up to the police department headquarters where the Crimes Against Persons unit you were going to interview him?
Generally, I believe it's probably about 10 miles, maybe 15. It's not that far.
After you left the scene, where did you go? Did you go immediately there or somewhere else?
Now, immediately went up to the Cobb County Police Headquarters.
Now, once you got there, was the defendant already in an interview room?
That is correct.
Once, was he handcuffed or unhandcuffed by the time you got there?
He was unhandcuffed.
Now, was the room he was in, was that locked or unlocked?
Unlocked at the time.
Okay. And were people present outside law enforcement,
That's correct.
outside of the room?
That's correct.
When you arrived, did you immediately go into the room or did you do anything else to get organized?
No. I went up there, you got my bearings, decided how we were going to proceed with the interview. I met with a Crimes Against Children detective. When an interview is conducted, usually 2 detectives are in the room. Crime Against Children also will interview suspects or persons involved in this type of incident.
So who was the name of the detective from Crimes Against Children that assisted you in the interview?
It was Detective Pete Waldorf.
When you got there, when the defendant was actually seated in an interview room, was he in there a while before you actually came in and questioned?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And once he was placed in there, after he was placed, what do you guys usually do? Do you just wait until you interview, or do you go ahead and hit the record button then?
It's usually hit before, or as close to them going into the room as we can manage.
Okay. And did you actually do that in this case?
I didn't.
Or did somebody do it and start recording well before you actually interviewed them?
Yes.
Okay. Now, describe the interview room to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Interview room, you hear it referred to as the box. It is just a room with 4 doors, or 4 walls, I'm sorry. It's got a 2-way mirror behind. At that time, we had a poster kind of covering it. It's kind of distracting, having that window behind you. You spend a lot of time looking at it. So I had kind of like a poster, like a map or belief or something, some paper hanging on it. It's got a table. It's got just 2 chairs at the table, and then it's got a 3rd chair or a 4th chair up against the wall. It's also got like a chalkboard or a dry erase board along the walls.
Now, when you went to interview him, was the defendant placed in one of these rooms?
That's correct.
And when you went in there, did anybody speak with him or ask him if he needed anything during that time?
The detective had him checked, saw it to him, see that he needed, I believe it was a glass of water.
At some point, did you and Detective Waldorf actually enter the room to speak with the defendant?
I did.
Okay. When you entered the room to speak with the defendant, when you do that usually, when you got somebody who has been brought in handcuffs, do you usually go over any particular rights with them?
I do.
Okay. And let me ask some preliminary questions. When you were speaking with the defendant, did he appear to be under the influence of any alcohol or drugs or anything of that nature?
He did not.
Okay. Did he appear coherent? Was he able to talk with you clearly?
He was.
Okay. Did you ask him his education level?
I did.
Okay. And what was his education level?
He had a degree in management information.
Did you threaten him in any way to make him speak with you that day?
I did not.
Did you promise him anything or hold out any hope of benefit to get him to talk to you that day?
I did not.
And when you talk about going over rights with the person that you're interviewing, what are those rights called?
They're called your Miranda rights.
Do you guys, at the Cobb County Police Department, do you have a form specifically that you go over with defendants to inform them of their rights and explain it to them to see if they will knowingly and voluntarily waive those rights in order to speak with you?
And we do.
Show defense counsel mark for identification purposes, State's Exhibit 425. Okay, Detective, I'm gonna show you State's Exhibit 425. Do you recognize that?
I do.
How do you recognize that?
It appears to be the Miranda rights that I read to him or defended on the 18th of June.
And is this the actual form, and all the parties sign that, you, yourself, and another witness?
That's correct.
And the defendant?
That's correct.
Your Honor, I tender State's Exhibit 425 at this time.
Any objection? Defendant.
I'm going to ask you to take a look at State's Exhibit 425, and for the purposes of the record, can you inform the jury as to what the form, how it's titled, and what rights that you read to the defendant?
This title, the Cobb County Police Department has a case number, education level, intoxication, English. Those are all questions we ask at the beginning of the interview. And then it says your rights, it says the place, the date, and the time, and those are just all filled out. Then we go through and there's a bunch of questions before. Before we ask you any questions, and I'll just read from the form, you must understand your rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to talk to a lawyer for advice before we ask you any questions, and to have him or her with you during questioning. If you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed for you before any questioning if you wish. If you decide to answer questions now without a lawyer present, you still have the right to stop answering at any time. You also have the right to stop answering at any time until you talk to a lawyer. And then at the bottom is the waiver of rights. I have read the statement of my rights and I understand what my rights are. I am willing to make a statement and answer questions. I do not want a lawyer at this time. I understand and know what I am doing. No promises or threats have been made to me, and no pressure or coercion of any kind has been used against me.
Now, Detective Stoddard, did you go over those verbally with the defendant?
I do. And when I go over these, the reason there's check marks next to them, you have the right to remain silent. Do you understand? And then we go through each individual sentence to make sure the defendant understands what we're getting into.
And did you do that with this defendant? Is that also on the recording of his interview?
It is on the recording.
Could you tell the jury a little bit about, well, first of all, did he then, after you went over his rights, acknowledge that he understood his rights and agreed to speak with you freely and voluntarily?
He did, and he also signed the form.
Now, when you have a video or an interview that's videotaped, could you tell the jury a little bit about that, like how your system works?
It's called the video oversight system. There are 2 cameras and microphones in the video room. One's like right behind your head, looking over at the defendant or the person of interest. The second one is up in the corner, and it kind of looks down upon the whole scene, if you will, of what's going on in that room. And it is recorded on the video oversight system. It's a duplicate system, so it's on a server with another server also attached to it.
And in this case, was both the time before the defendant was interviewed, leading up to when you came in the room, and any time in between until the interview was over, was it all recorded in that room?
It was.
Okay, and when the recording was done, when you were done with your interview, was the recording device turned off?
It was.
I'm going to show you what I marked for identification purposes in State's Exhibit 426.
Right, Detective. To show you what's been marked for identification purposes, the State's Exhibit 426. Okay, do you recognize that?
I do.
And how do you recognize that?
It's a copy of the video oversight. Once it's put on the server, we then copy it onto a disk. I would copy it onto a disk for myself, a disk to go into evidence, and then also usually a disk to go to the district attorney's office. This appears to be my copy of the disk.
And how do you recognize it as your copy?
It's my handwriting. It's number 77. It's got a video oversight on it.
Okay, and have you reviewed that, and is it a fair and accurate recording of your interview with the defendant on June 18, 2014, starting about 6 p.m.?
Correct.
Your Honor, I tender State's Exhibit 426.
Yeah, I don't hear you talking with the foundation, but any previous objections that we've already litigated or whatnot, I would reassert those objections at this time.
That'll be fine. Admitted.
And permission to publish at this time, Judge.
All right. So, we're going to have to take a short recess for setup purposes, ladies and gentlemen. Close your notepads. Have a recess.
It's all right with the